I am delighted to introduce our final two presentations by Kai McKenzie, based in Canada, and Joy Scantlebury and Marina Lombardo, based in the USA. Their presentations are based on the theme of identity in ESL and beyond. It's so timely. These presentations will be followed by our final plenary, Dr. Rachel Elizabeth Weisler. She's from the USA. But for now, let's hear from Kai McKenzie. Kai?
Yes, thank you. I do want to make this interactive, so I'm going to give a brief introduction, and I'm going to want to share my personal experience. I am currently visiting Colorado, where I'm from, but I live in Canada, so I'm binational, bicultural in that regard. And I also want to honor the indigenous peoples of the lands on which I work here in Colorado, the Arapaho and the Cheyenne traditional territory here, and where I live in Victoria, British Columbia, the traditional territories of the Lekwungen peoples and their relationships with the Songhees, the Esquimalt, the Saanich, in my sincere hope that we can work toward a reconciliation on these lands. So I would invite all of you, as I get ready to share a screen, to share in the chat whether you personally identify as gender diverse, if you feel that you'd like to, and also whether you have tried to incorporate gender diversity into your classrooms, and whether you've experienced gender diverse students. And that would help me begin this. As I said, I'd like to make this a little bit interactive. I come to this with deeply personal experience as a parent of gender diverse youth and an advocate for them, also as a genderqueer person. And then for the last 5 years, I've been working through the University of Saskatchewan on a research project dealing with resilience in gender diverse youth. And I've been, for the past year, a visiting PhD student in the chair with the chair in transgender studies at the University of Victoria. So I'm writing out of my experience, and what I want to bring today is a reflection on some of the challenges that I've experienced, that teachers do face, that I've experienced through my children, and also my own experience at the university level at the University of Saskatchewan, and also the advocacy that I'm trying to do to make these this sharing and these stories feel more to enable teachers, to help them feel more comfortable. So at first I'm having trouble. Whoa, sorry, my screen is a little slow here, just moving from screen to screen. So let me okay, let me try again. So what are the challenges? In my experience, and speaking very much from a gender diverse perspective, but also supported with the research by Cordelia Fine, whose work, Delusions of Gender, provides a lot of psychological research to show that most parents today have what she calls half-changed minds around gender, that they want their children to have equal opportunities, but they do believe in a kind of bioessentialism, that they think that this gender assignment at birth is a natural thing, and that there are bioessentialist differences between boys and girls, which also does not recognize the range of sex and also the range of gender. And then in the course of because of this belief, the research that Fine references, the psychological studies she references, shows that parents actually hold and talk to female assigned children a lot more, and they give male assigned children a lot of physical stimulation. And then when the children are around 3 or 4 years old, they start saying, oh, see, I told you so. Boys and girls are naturally different. So her point is that we don't necessarily know because we don't have a neutral situation. And because of this conditioning process, those who don't, have that assignment at birth, but it goes along with the whole cultural a big load of cultural connections around how these children are supposed to behave based on that gender assignment. And this is where we call the gender expression. And children who don't accord with that, don't conform, are shamed. But my position point is that all children are affected, because in going in through this conditioning process, children learn that it's dangerous and it's shameful not to conform. And so this is really the source of transphobia. When they see this in others, they feel uncomfortable. So my key point is that gender diversity is everywhere. I have the opportunity through my coursework at the University of Saskatchewan to study gender diverse experience through English language throughout history in multiple arenas. And also as a parent activist doing homeschooling projects with my children, we were studying gender diversity worldwide and through world history. And it simply is universal. Unfortunately, these experiences have been suppressed. And so we have a situation where the stories that have been erased, and my conviction as a teacher is that if we don't make a conscious effort to re-engage them, we're participating in that erasure. And I also, my other key point is that this does not just affect gender diverse people. This is something that affects everybody, going back to that issue of conditioning. We're all harmed by not being able to discuss the ways in which we're impacted by systems of gendering. It's only a benefit to understand how we're being influenced, and so that we can then find our own ways to grow into ourselves and feel empowered. So I really want teachers to think about that it's not something over here, right? It's just part of everything. And you can find ways to bring it into everything you do. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my screen here. So I want to share my own personal experience with a transgender lesson. I'm actually very new to ESL. I've been more in the literary as a teaching assistant at the University of Saskatchewan. I've been doing a lot of introduction to literature courses. But the last 4 months, I did the TESOL workshop at Inlingua in Victoria, and I really wanted to add that to my background and ability. And my practicum involved 2 days of teaching. And I was told during the course of the TESOL workshop, the training, that Inlingua, which is an education company in Victoria, British Columbia, that hosts a lot of international students, that they shy away from what they consider to be controversial topics like gender identity or abortion, because they have students from so many different countries, and they don't want to create situations that are difficult, which, I think we can understand that. But it's the same. So I had a mentor who was really open to letting me write a lesson plan, but did let me know that that was the company's position. However, when it came time to the practicum, I felt this is what I stand for, and I wouldn't be living up to my own personal obligation if I didn't try to do that. So my first day of the practicum, I did take the lesson plan I had written, and I adapted it to the needs of that class. And I was expecting, so again, I'm just like this new practicum student, right? I was expecting to have, the teacher said, about 8 students from Japan. And then what happened, because Inlingua is constantly bringing in new students, and it's just a rotating door with all of their students in classrooms. They don't all start at the same time. They're just constantly. The room was flooded with students from all over the world. And so it was an interesting experience. And I just want to share the experience of doing this lesson plan. Let's see, I need to get in order to share the lesson plan, I'm trying to do escape to get out of the large screen share, and I'm not managing to. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment so I can get it back to where I need it to be. And I'll share screen again. sorry about that little inconvenience. So in this lesson plan, it's going right back to where it was. So I'm sorry, I'm having trouble moving over. So I'm just going to explain it to you. Basically, the idea of this was that this is a conversation lesson. So the emphasis was on listening and speaking. And I felt that given my own experience with a lot of situations where when I tried to focus on even focusing on transgender literature, I tried to give a lecture on transgender literature at a senior home, and it was really impossible for the audience to receive the information because they got hung up on transgender bodies. They just couldn't get past this kind of problem they felt to try to understand what it was they were talking about. And so I found that was a real problem. I wanted them to engage with transgender people as humans and their experiences and their stories, and I couldn't get them to. So for this lesson, I tried something kind of an oblique approach, and I think this might be useful. So the idea of making the transgender or gender diverse content just a natural part of the lesson, but not the main focus. And the topic was leaving home. And so I chose a news article about a Texas family with a gender diverse child that was feeling forced to leave home because of the legislation that's making gender affirming care for trans youth unavailable, and also penalizing parents and placing them at risk through putting them under social services scrutiny and surveillance. So, I shared our news article. I had to kind of simplify it a little bit by reading it and getting response. And for most of the students in the class, the whole topic of transgender was completely new. So I had to give some basic explanation that there's such a thing as a gender assignment at birth, and these are people who actually don't go along with that. And then providing this background around this news article to show them this family and just this whole experience of feeling that they had to leave home, and the transgender child's testimony about the impacts of that, and then moved into the topic of leaving home in general. So the students were invited to share their own experiences. They're all in Canada as international students, so obviously they have left home. And I felt that this was a successful way to introduce this content because it took the pressure off of the transgender identities. It avoided these problematic conversations where cisgender students might be resisting, and that you don't know whether you have gender diverse students in your classrooms because they may not have come out. And it's traumatizing to hear, for those students to hear themselves their very identities to be questioned. So you really want to avoid those situations. And this is kind of a clear way of doing that because I wasn't even inviting those conversations. I was just using it as a starting point. So to take a topic and then find some connection, some thread of gender diverse experience, and then use that as the lesson plan to discuss that topic. I think that could be very constructive. So moving on. Whoops, again, sorry, I'm having trouble with my navigation here. And this is just a few examples of other news articles that I found dealing with these similar issues. Dwayne and Zaya Wade and family, very in the news, and a family that's publicly in the news a lot and more pronounced, people are aware of, have just left Florida, and so these are similar stories to the ones that I was working with. Now, on my last screen here, I just want to. This is I'm just brainstorming here. Again, I wanted this to be informal. Brainstorming from all the transgender news that I read about issues that could be used. I personally I have my housemate in Victoria is a transgender refugee from Uganda. And so I'm very aware of her stories and her communities back in Uganda as she's sharing. She came in 2019, but she was in a safe house in Kenya for 7 years before being able to immigrate. And she has many of her friends from that safe house are all over the world now. So I get a lot of stories through her of, I think the emphasis could be also on trans communities, on how gender diverse people are taking care of each other. And we have examples of that, like Miss Major is a prominent activist in the Southern United States. And there's a whole tradition that was also celebrated in the TV series Pose of Black trans women being house mothers to younger gender diverse people who've been often lose their families, right? Often are cast out. And so creating these families of care, these chosen families, that would be something you could include with families, topic of family. I have been hearing about legal cases in Japan and Peru. Those are issues, court cases and legislative change. Of course, we have the whole big backlash in the states right now, and what I call, safe states versus unsafe states with state legislation. Some states declaring themselves sanctuary states over gender affirming care and abortion rights. And then popular culture, there's a lot of media around. There's a well-known Chinese transgender TV host, well accepted in China. And I just read about a transgender winner beauty pageant in the Netherlands. And so many, many stories that can be used. Now I want to end with a little video just to demonstrate this, Black trans circles, this issue of community. And then I wanted to devote lots of time to conversation. And then if the conversation doesn't come, I will share some more of my personal experiences. So let's watch this video together.
I want to see Black trans women elevated and lifted up to their fullest potential.
You deserve every good thing, every good thing.
Anytime you see people who are treated as disposable by the social, political, and economic systems and institutions of the day, saying, I got a right to the tree of life, it's a radical statement, because nothing in the material world affirms that belief. So what you have to do to know that is extraordinary.
So thank you. I'm going to stop sharing screen now because I really wanted to make it interactive, like I said. And then if we don't get enough interaction, I have a lot of life experiences with these issues, and I would love to share more. So just looking in the chat now. Again, I'd really love to hear from you about your personal experiences with these challenges, and I really invite you to share out now and have a collective conversation about you know, our experiences with gender diversity. And my main point again is that these are not just transgender issues. These affect all of us. And that some of my most eye-opening learning has been running workshops for cisgender people. Cisgender people are people who have accepted their gender assignment. And they often don't realize they're sitting on a lot of experience. So I often think that trans, especially like my trans gender diverse kids, are very knowledgeable about gender because they've had to look at things critically. And sometimes people who the cisgender people are often ones who can really benefit from these forms of, you know, discussion and investigation. So question, what has been some of the pushback, any, received from parents and family members when discussing these topics in class? My big challenge that I've experienced as a parent is that teachers have been really unwilling to even begin. I'm here visiting Boulder, Colorado, where I'm from, and I took the Boulder Valley School District through a civil rights action just to try to get them to include gender diverse stories in their curriculum. And it was exhausting, and we're all tired at the end. All I got from them was promise to create a list that would never be used. And the teachers were, with you know, one rare exception, the teachers were uncomfortable including these topics. And what that means to me with my own children and any gender diverse young people is what you're doing. A lot of districts will do what the Boulder Valley School District did is you know, they'll work on washrooms, and sorry, I'm Canadian pronunciation here. I'm still saying washrooms and pronouns, and they think that that's, you know, creating a safe space. But then you have gender diverse children in your systems who are more openly and obviously gender diverse because you've encouraged them to be there, but you're not including them in the curriculum. So you're dishing up for everybody, for all the students, a world that doesn't include them. And that's even worse than not having them there at all, because you're teaching the trans students that they don't exist, and you're teaching the other students that these gender diverse kids really don't count. So you're actually teaching transphobia. And I don't think that these teachers are ill-meaning, but what they need, because even the really progressive teachers that want to do it don't always feel comfortable because they don't want to do it wrong. So what I really advocate for is that we build systems where the school systems have curriculum in place and that it's mandated at every age. And I think living now in British Columbia, I think British Columbia and California are the states and provinces that have really the best position on this. And British Columbia has a position that is very constructive, because what I've experienced in Colorado and also Saskatchewan is a terrible thing called the opt-out option. And what that is that teachers are required, if they include any LGBTQ content, to warn all the parents. But what this does is it sends a message of shame. So if you can imagine, my gender diverse child in grade 6 at Brunskill Elementary in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, was bullied all year. And the school did 1 hour of programming without Saskatoon. But before they did it, they had to warn all the parents. That's not helpful. But British Columbia has a policy that parents are not in public schools, right, where everybody gets money from everybody, for everybody, you're serving everybody. Parents are not allowed to opt out of anything that does not have anything to do with sex and reproduction. And they're distinguishing between identities and actual sex and reproduction. That distinction needs to be made, because unfortunately it's not being made in most states and provinces. And this is why my own children's identities get sexualized. Like in grade 2 here in Colorado, Boulder, Colorado, where I am now visiting, at Creekside Elementary, my daughter was in grade 2, and we were told that they couldn't talk about transgender identities because it was not an appropriate topic and it had something to do with sex. Like my 7-year-old has nothing to do with sex. She's just a girl. And so this is these kinds of how to think through these issues and really stand for being more critical and realizing that people of every identity have to have the right to be fully included, and their stories and their histories and their struggles. And I appreciate the questions in the chat, but of course I'd love to see your faces. How do these matters differ in the US versus Canada, and how could we co-create curriculum with students in our classrooms so they feel free to express themselves? And how can students express themselves in a safe environment? And what are some pedagogical approaches we can take? I want to mention that at that same Creekside Elementary School here in Boulder, where my grade 2 daughter was, as a transgender girl, was actually not out at all. She was not out. But at that time, my younger child was in grade 1, was as a non-binary person, was very out. And the whole school was kind of in crisis over this. But this grade 1 teacher, I told her very early that she would be dealing with these issues. That Sky was genderqueer. This would come up right away. I handed her a big pile of books and told her, you could use these constructively in the classroom. This is Erin Cameron. And she did. And in this school that was in crisis, which I was taking to a civil rights action, she was just quietly creating a wonderful classroom. And what she did is she used those storybooks to help the students respect and include gender diverse students. And by doing so, I think she not only made my child Sky feel welcome, but any other students who may have been. Again, this isn't just about trans students, because just think of all the conditioning and all the programming that our poor young people get about what it's supposed to mean to be a boy or a girl. It's from my perspective, it's horrific. It's violence, right? Like, that's my non-binary perspective. Like, how can you do this to people? And these little kids, they then also get that permission. If they're girls or boys, they get permission to do it their way, to be the person they feel themselves to be, to express the full range of their humanity. So I do think that just from using stories, listening to the children, and Erin Cameron did it in a school that was, you would have thought that she would have not felt she could, but she's still teaching in the district. So I think standing your ground as a teacher, as a professional, you know the mandate, that we are there to include and take care of everybody. And our gender diverse students are in crisis, even in the best of school districts. It's not, it's bad. They're not feeling safe, and they're suicidal. And as a parent, just trying to help my kids grow up right now is really, really difficult. So I think your mandate as a teacher, and whatever your personal background and beliefs are, you still, your mandate is to make sure you support and listen to and create that safe environment. And I think at all ages, encouraging them to do artwork and express themselves, and then using that. I love to just take the material my students are giving me and use that, at whatever level you're teaching, use that as your and of course, Kanisha, you so really beautifully described doing that as well in the classroom. And I think that can work at the lower age levels as well, encouraging students to self-express around experiences they've had through artwork and story, and then using that to create discussions, and standing your ground. If you have parents who feel threatened, just reminding them that students need to be able to deal with the world they live in, and that we all, probably if parents are pushing back, it's because, again, going back to my first slide around how transphobia gets created, is that they've been shamed and they're uncomfortable, and so helping them as well to understand the benefits of being allowed to express your humanity. Any further questions? And then I'll just, allow more time for other presenters.
Thank you so much, Kai. And as I always say, the conversation never ends once the presentation goes down. feel free to continue the conversation in the chat. This is very important. All of our presenters share very important insights, and I do want to thank you, Kai, especially. Stories are so important for hearing about critical issues, diverse insights, marginalized identities, social strata, and more, as a means of identifying challenges, struggles, and working to create equitable measures that are inclusive, accessible to all, and most importantly, safe for all, right? So we have to begin somewhere, and oftentimes, if these topics are outlawed or forbidden or taboo, students are a little bit scared to talk about these topics. And that's when we have to have some one-on-one and get deeper involved to find out where the student is from. So getting to know students is always number one. So speaking of insights, diverse insights and stories, we're going to move on to our next presenters. Joy Scantlebury and Marina Lombardo will be tapping into English language learners' superpowers through creative storytelling. So we're in for a treat here.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. My name is Joy Scantlebury, and I teach ESL, English as a Second Language, or as it's called in New York State, ENL, English as a New Language, at Pocantico Hills School, which is a pre-K through 8 school in Sleepy Hollow, New York. And I'm here today with my colleague, Marina Lombardo, who is a general education teacher, and she's also a 3rd grade teacher at our school. And the name of our presentation today is Tapping into English Language Learners' Superpowers through Creative Storytelling. So this encapsulates Marina and my perspective when it comes to English language learners. And it states that English language learners, or ELLs, multilingual learners, MLs, enter our classroom with valuable gifts. And the key is to tap into them and shift our perspective. And that is something that Marina and I deeply believe in, because they have experiences, they have culture, they have so much to share. And we basically take an assets-based approach when we work with our Ls, MLs, because they have so much to offer. This is a quote by Maria Nicolini from her article entitled "Stories Can Save Us: A Defense of Narrative Writing." And the quote states that we are by nature storytellers. Therefore, it only makes sense to allow students a chance to first do something in which they are already good. And this is something that is a universal in terms of our cultures. It also connects to our theme of identity. When students are allowed to express their identities through storytelling, it really isn't, and it's not only empowering for them, but also empowering for their teachers, their classmates. It's a win-win. And it's basically something that we firmly believe in. And why not? If they have ideas, how can we cultivate those ideas in story form? So Marina and I conducted an action research on how to find a creative way to utilize storytelling. And we focused on the following areas. We wanted to center our students' voices. We wanted, as I mentioned before, to take an assets-based approach where we knew that students are a gold mine. We just have to tap into them. We also integrated funds of knowledge, which is Louis Mall's approach of utilizing what they know and what their values, what's important to them culturally as well. And then something new we tried was oral rehearsal, in which students get to practice or speak out what they want to write before they write it down, or before someone else writes it down. And it's a very effective way to capture their ideas so that they don't feel frustrated that they can't generate ideas while writing at the same time. We also use parallel teaching, in which when I focused on my pullout group, I would be reinforcing certain identity concepts that Marina was teaching, and as well as content area. And then Marina would also reinforce some of the content that I was using, or some of the the writing process in the classroom. So it really was a way that we reflected each learning in both spaces for our students. And something interesting that emerged from this action research is that the English language learners created themselves as superheroes. And I'm going to refer to that in a few minutes, but I just want you to kind of think about that, because I'm going to go back to that in a minute. And then in terms of charting our students' writing journey, we use Campbell's Hero's Journey to map each step of their collaborative writing process. So picture this. Do you remember how it was in the fall of 2020? I know that feels like maybe a million years ago, but if you can just put your mind back to 2020 and what was happening, whether you were teaching in a public school, higher education, we were still very much embedded in COVID-19, and it was a highly stressful time. And what a lot of schools were going through was, our school was, we had some students who were learning remotely at home and others who were learning in person. And it was this whole like kind of figure things out while you're teaching. And it was really stressful, I think, for a lot of anxiety as well among our students. So I had a pull-out group of second grade students. One was Susan from India and Jenny from Mexico. And I was teaching a post-reading lesson that really wasn't going well, to be quite honest. It was, if I was bored, then I figured, okay, they're probably bored too. It wasn't going well. And it wasn't as planned. And then Susan just blurts out in the middle of this lesson, this not very stellar lesson, that she liked telling stories and she liked using her imagination. And I thought, that's interesting. And then Jenny says, me too. So they basically kind of just inserted themselves in a lesson that wasn't going so well. And they just said, these are our passions. And I'm sitting on the side thinking, this is interesting. Either I run with this or I go back to this lesson that I had planned. Well, I decided to go with with their idea. Then they decided they wanted to create a story in which the two of them travel to a magical planet named, well, they're trying to figure out the name. Jenny decided to call the planet Wago. And then Susan said, no, we could call the planet maybe Mingo or Aqua. And then what ensues is this heated debate between them. And I'm watching the meeting of minds unravel in front of my eyes. They start arguing and they're, like very unhappy, like, no, it's gotta be. And I'm on the side thinking this light bulb is like, this is either gonna go really well or really badly in the next few seconds. But magically, they combined their ideas and said, well, let's name this magical planet that we write about Aqua Wago Mingo. That is a mouthful, but it was authentically their idea. So I decided, let's run with it. What transpired was something that was not even scripted. It wasn't part of my plan. It just happened organically between these two students. They said, we want to write a book, and they did. And they wrote this wonderful book called A Trip to Planet Aqua Wago Mingo. The premise was very simple. The two of them were sleeping in their beds one night, and then they decided to creep out and meet each other. And then they blasted off to space to this magical planet called Aqua Wago Mingo. And on that planet, they discovered two mythical creatures, a unicorn dinosaur cat, who was Jenny's new friend, and the unicorn cat, who was Susan's friend. And they had a great time playing with them, and they had a big feast. And then they blasted back to planet Earth, snuck in their beds. Nobody knew they had even left planet Earth. And they said, they ended the story with, it was the best day ever. So I thought that was the end of that. I said, oh, okay, that's nice. They wrote a book. Okay, moving right along. Let's go back to the curriculum. No, what was interesting was by that time, Justin, a student who was from China, he was remotely learning and now returned to in-person learning. He heard they had written this book one, A Trip to Planet Aqua Wago Mingo, and he wanted in. He said, hey, I could write this book with you. So what happened? They collaborated and they wrote book two. Basically the same premise. The only difference is that they kind of forced Justin and they put a jetpack on him and made him go to the planet, even though he said he didn't believe them in the story. And they had to prove to him that it really was true. And then, of course, when he goes with them, that he discovers he has his own mythical creature friend, the dragon shark, who's his friend. They have a big party. They go back to planet Earth. They go back to school the next day and they say, we had the best trip ever. Of course, nobody at school believes them, but they always end with, it was the best day ever. Book 3 was, again, we go on to book 3. I thought, oh, wait, are we done yet? No, these students were so invested in putting themselves in this this book, which is now becoming a series. Again, this was not part of the plan, but I said, let's go with it. Book 3 took a bit of a pivot because Justin, who was a big fan of sushi, said, wouldn't it be cool if we added a character called the Sushi King, and he could be like a messenger from Aquawagomingo and come to planet Earth to tell us that our creature friends are in trouble. And then Jenny said, oh, that's great. I know what we could do. We could add 2 mischievous creatures. And of course, Jenny, being a fan of Mexican food, said, let's call him Mr. Taco and Mr. Burrito. So in book 3, they added these additional characters. Now, of course, they added a problem. What was the problem? Mr. Taco and Mr. Burrito wreaked havoc on Aquawagomingo by sequestering their unicorn cat, dragon shark, unicorn dinosaur cat. He locked them up. And of course, this is an additional thing they added was, they created these magic potions that dropped from the sky just as the Sushi King was relaying this terrible news. These potions gave them magical powers. And I think Jenny had the power to transform into any animal. Susan could use her ice powers, and Justin had super speed. But the only way that they could free their friends from the clutches of Mr. Taco and Mr. Burrito was to work together. And they did that in book 3, in which they freed their friends. Susan froze Mr. Taco and Mr. Burrito, and they could not cause any more havoc, or so we think. And then this is where, again, 3rd grade, I'm thinking, okay, so we did book 1, we did book 2, we did book 3. I think we're done here. Nope. And as the 3rd graders, they now were in Ms. Lombardo's class, Marina Lombardo, my colleague who is here today presenting with me. And we have an additional student. His name is Oscar from India. He found out that Jenny, Susan, and Justin were writing this series. And he said, I want to be part of this series. So what happens is now he wants to be part of the group. And this is where Marina and I use this model of the hero's journey to chart their writing process of book 4. It took them all year, but that's a good thing because they could take their time. We use this model of the hero's journey to show their writing journey. And this was their call to action to write book 4. And they said, book 4 is going to be the best book ever. It's going to be epic. They thought maybe we could throw in some, fancy language and vocabulary. And then I suggested, hey, let's put maybe a glossary at the end of the book. So then your friends, whoever reads this, will learn some new words and new vocabulary. And then they also added on, and you see what's happening with the plot line. They added on more layers. They added in some science as well. And thanks to Marina, who saw this spark in her students, she helped me to take their writing journey to a new level during the 2021-2022 school year in the creation of book 4. And I will let Marina now continue to tell the journey, their writing collaborative journey.
All right, so before I continue and pick up with the meeting of the mentors part of the hero's journey, I have to just kind of wiggle in here that when these students were in 2nd grade, I'll never forget the day when I was at the copy machine waiting for some of my whatever I needed to be printed, because that's not really what was important. But what was important was that I was waiting for the copies of Aquawagomingo to finish being published. And as each page went through, I picked it up and I was like, oh my gosh, this is really good. And, I crossed my fingers and I hoped that I would be the lucky teacher to get them. And I did. And I became one of their mentors as well. Joy is her first mentor, steadfast guide, and I came in as well. And this was like a really great time for both of us to lead the children in different types of ways. And not only were we their mentors, but we were their co-learners. We were learning quite a bit from them about who they were, what their goals, their aspirations, and their dreams were, and how we could help make that come alive for them, both in their Aqua Wagamingo story, but also in anything else that they were doing within the third grade classroom. And again, just as much as I was lucky to work with all these kids, I was really lucky to work with Joy, because Joy was learning about all the different strategies that she mentioned before, but oral rehearsal was really a key pivotal part of the work that she did with the students. So she followed the writing process that we used in the classroom, which involved brainstorming, free writing, drafting, revising, editing, and all of that. So she was doing all of that type of work, following along with the different elements of storytelling that we were doing during various units during the year, but also included the part about oral rehearsal and capturing the ideas of all of the students and then sharing that with me so that I could continue to support them in the class, as well as support any learner that needed that type of guidance as well. So that was a great time when a lot of the kids' ideas were captured, and in the storytelling process, we learned more about each of the writers, because they all added in another character, and coincidentally, many of them added in their siblings, except for Justin, who added in a brand new character, and that led to some other challenges that the students had to work through together as a group. So just a little bit more about oral rehearsal. So we have two quotes here, and I'll just read them pretty quickly. Talking gives children an opportunity to talk about, develop, and rehearse the content for their writing. In this way, oral rehearsal supports the creative generation of ideas. We have a second quote: oral rehearsal may take some of the burden off of the central executive and thereby free up resources students could use to enhance the quality of their stores. In other words, serve as an external memory. So by doing this type of work with the kids, we were holding on to their ideas, and well, you'll see a little clip of something in a few minutes, and you'll just see like how much pleasure all of this work obviously gave them. But we used this, and we were able to hold on to everything, you know, that they were doing. And as I mentioned, there was a challenge. So you have four students who are working together, and a lot of this work is also going to encompass sometimes trials and failures, and what are we going to work through, and what's the challenge we're going to overcome. So as mentioned before, through this writing and the books, we're learning so much about our learners here. And Justin decided that he was not going to create a character based on a sibling. He created a character named Rosie. And at first, the other students resisted. They said, no, it has to be this way. But Justin, who was in the whole group classroom, a very quiet, reserved student who has an amazing sense of humor. He felt so comfortable with all of his co-writers at this part, even though it was uncomfortable to have a moment where, you know, your peers were saying, no, we can't do that, to explain articulately that he wanted this character to be meddlesome. He wanted this character to add the humor to the story. And once he was able to articulate his thinking and share all of these like wonderful ideas that he had for Rosie and what she could contribute to the students finally agreed to include her. So this was one of my favorite days during their school year. Every time you go through a challenge and trials and tribulations, there has to be some type of reward at the end. And Joy was telling me all about the work that she was doing outside of the classroom with the book, and how they were almost to the end of their draft. And I said, well, we should do a read aloud. We should have them come in and read their story. Nobody else knows what they're doing. It's not like it was a secret on purpose. It's just that the other kids in their class didn't know. And I said, not only that, it'll be really good for them to get some feedback from their peers. This is what we do all the time when we're doing all different types of reading. So they shared their story, their draft, their working draft to the class, and they got some feedback. And I think we have, yeah. So our clip is pretty long. So we're just gonna play maybe like the first minute or two, Joy, you think?
I think
Just so everyone can experience a little bit of the excitement of our 4 co-writers, this team of incredible kids. This is just audio. And oh, I think we actually sprinkled in some of the illustrations too for you too.
And feel free to lower your volume if it's a little too loud, but I think it might, I'll try it. Please let me know if you can hear this. Oops, sorry about that. Let me go back. Can you hear that? I don't think they're able to hear.
One Saturday afternoon, the Super Friends were having fun at Alan's house. Grace and Alan were playing Roblox. Ian and his sister Saya were watching TV, while Marina and her sister Hannah were looking through the windows for villains. They were using their mouthpiece.
Okay, and then there's an illustration of Harini and her sister Hanu looking for villains. There's no binoculars, but that's part of it. Keep going. Grace's sister
Alice was playing the guitar, and Jerry
and singing.
Jerry the stickman toy was fast asleep on his bed. Sorry, Mrs. Dog was jumping on the walls and running around. Alice's babysitter, Rosalino, also called Rosie, was there too. She kept interrupting Alan and Grace while they were trying to play Roblox, as well as Marina and Hannah, who were still looking for villains. Rosie also was bothering Ion, Saya, Alice, Dory, and Jerry. In fact, Rosie interrupted everybody 100 times. I preferred 1,000. Yeah. They became so annoyed by Rosie interrupting that they say, "That's enough, Rosie! That's enough, Rosie!"
Uh-oh, you don't want to know what happened to Rosie.
Everybody stop
No, but we do want to know what happened.
what they were doing and click over Rosie. Don't do it! What the garbage can? What as punishment?
Whoa. Everyone stopped what they were doing. Continue, because they didn't hear that part.
Everybody stopped what they were doing and went over Rosie and dumped her in the garbage can.
They're right here, not mom.
Bye-bye, Rosie.
As
punishment. Rosie was so tired that she fell asleep in the garbage can. She did not even wake up.
Poor Rosie. And there she is, with her legs sticking out. Okay, poor Rosie.
So you could see she did add some humor to the story. And what I really love is that in the background, you can hear a lot of their peers calling out stuff and laughing along with them, but also you hear the excitement of the readers. And this was in progress work too. It's not like it was the final copy. It was just a read aloud to get some feedback. So after that experience, the students used the feedback to revise and edit. They added in more illustrations of food from their cultures for the celebration scene in the book. And they included all different types of food, as well as the piñata, which is all different elements that were so important to their cultures. And as we return transformed to the ordinary world, Joy and I felt like it was so important to make this a really big deal for the kids, because it is a big deal. We wanted to have a book release party for them, like published authors usually do. And we invited classmates, teachers, staff, administrators to come along. We had copies of all of the books for their peers, and they autographed them for their classmates. They took Q&A, and they also shared some of their favorite parts of the book. And here's some photographs from our book release. What we realize about this work is that as the students are working on Aqua Wagamingo, they are creating books that they can see themselves in. And that's why we included this important quote by Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop. When there are enough books available that act as both mirrors and windows for all children, they will see that we can celebrate both our differences and our similarities, because together we are what makes us human. Our students created books that gave others windows into their lives. They created mirrors. The books were mirrors that represented them, and then also sliding glass doors, so that we can walk through in imagination to become part of whatever worlds have been created or recreated by the author. Aqua Wagamingo, their creation was shared with so many people. So during this whole year of working on book 4, we implemented the oral rehearsal, and Joy really did a lot of that. And like I said, she shared with me all of the structure so that I could help with them. We utilized parallel teaching to support the collaborative storytelling. Joy was pushed in during science and content areas, so she really helped to capitalize on vocabulary and using the vocabulary in a variety of settings. So not just in my classroom in one domain, like there were words like forced, plunged, approached, hypnotized, determined, that came from the general education class that the students were able to use in different ways and integrate authentically into their stories. There were norms that were created so that everyone's voice was heard and respectful disagreements. As Joy mentioned in the beginning, these books have gotten more complex along the way, and they added a glossary, they added in their siblings, they added in native foods, and they added in a new character who was quite meddlesome. When we were writing up the story of our action research, we did a lot of different type of work. And one thing that we did is we really kind of thought about our roadmap, and we identified all of the things that each of us did and how they came together, and how Joy was guiding the heroes and I was counseling the heroes. And we wanted to share that with you too. I know it's very small writing, but throughout the course of the year, we did a bunch of different things to support the kids, to help them make this book come alive at the end of the year. So we wanted to kind of begin to come to the close of it by treating you with some of the illustrations authentically from some of the books, as you can see here. And Joy, did you want to share a little bit more about?
Sure. They're still writing, everybody. This started as second graders with two second graders who just inserted themselves in a lesson that wasn't going so well. And out of that came this book series. They're doing book 5, and a new member, Tony, and it's interesting because Marina was the one who helped me bring in Tony, because she noticed that he was having these consultations at lunchtime with them and saying, hey, I want to be part of this group, and let me tell you why. And then he was telling them all the plot ideas. So Tony was not even an English language learner. but he wanted to be part of the group. He had a very robust vocabulary, very imaginative, and most of all, enthusiastic. So as of this year, book 5 was published. It's called The Curse of the Planet Kidnap. Apparently, in this book, Ako Wagomingo was kidnapped, or rather was missing. And of course, those meddlesome characters, Mr. Taco and Mr. Burrito, were behind it, and actually 2 other characters, Mr. Hamburger and Mr. French Fry. I mean, there's a whole food theme going on. But like we had done as 4th graders, we had also a book launch as we had in 3rd grade. Same students, but they had one more. And here you can see them writing, and they're reading excerpts of the book to their peers who are in rapt attention and had wonderful feedback. So it really was community building in addition to collaborative writing. And Marina, I'd let you.
Yeah. So in conclusion, this action research resulted in the generation of creative ideas, collaboration for both our co-writers among themselves, for Joy and I together as professionals and educators, and then at all of us, because we learned quite a lot about the children as well. The promotion of literacy, community building, empowering ELs, and our ELs inspiring their classmates to create stories of their own. Because what I didn't mention is that after that first book release, I cannot tell you how many students were like, I want to make my own planet, and what would happen if we turn this into a play? It was really wonderful to see all of the students so encouraging and excited for this group of writers, and to find that little passion within themselves. We did write up the full story of our action research. It's in the New York State TESOL ebook project, supporting student success through community asset mapping, which not only our story, but there's many wonderful stories within, and it's really focused on asset-based learning. So if you wanted to learn more about the story in depth, as well as some of our resources, we have the full video in there and the infographics of our roadmap. That would be a great place to see those.
And finally, I also tapped into my own writing, and I published a flash memoir entitled Bajan Memories, Always in My Heart. My family's originally from Barbados, so I wrote about growing up in an immigrant household and community, which is an anthology of immigrant stories, edited by Dr. Vicky Girakakis of Malloy University.
Thank you, Joy and Marina, for demonstrating how powerful storytelling can be when centering your students. This is really inspirational.